When I was about 10 years old, I had heard a couple of songs on a jukebox, which you wouldn't even know what a jukebox is today, but in my day, we would put a nickel in that jukebox, and that was in about 1948, 49, 50, right around there. And I would listen to songs with my mother and father. And there was a guy who was famous at the time, and still famous today. His name is Les Paul. And his wife and him had a duo, and it was Les Paul and Mary Ford. And they had many, many hit records. And that's how I got started, listening to his records. And that's why I wanted to play guitar. And I begged my mother and father for a guitar. You know, please get me a guitar. I want to start playing. And that was at about 8, 9 years old. So from that point on, a Christmas later, I think it was about, when I was about 10, they gave me a guitar from Sears and Roebuck. And I started trying to pick out notes on it and just trying to learn on my own, and then took a couple of lessons too, but not very many, but I did take some lessons. And they got me to understand more about music. And then I used my ear to learn from records and playing those things back. And finally, I said, wow, I want a better guitar. And I kept on getting more and more and more. So finally, I said, now I'm going to start fixing these guitars. Lo and behold, my mother and father were ready to kill me because they had just bought a new guitar now, and now I'm tearing it apart and trying to make it better, right? So that doesn't go over too well. So anyway, so the point being is that's how it started. And from that point on, I started teaching myself, reading every book I could about it, studying Leonardo da Vinci and many, many other artists of the Renaissance period to understand how they work with their hands and how they design things, especially learning to draw down on a piece of paper and then taking that and making an object out of it, such as a guitar. So that's really how it started. Okay, I've been working with Les. It's probably about 40 years. I actually known him since 1960. And I started working with him about a few years later. So it'd be about 40 years I've been working with Les. And Les being the most famous guitar player in the world, and if the young folks don't know that, he is, and all of the guitar players that we have today are really people who idolize Les Paul, who came up from Jimmy Page to Sting to you name it. There are just so many that come to see him every Monday night at the Iridium, actually in New York. And I'm his sound engineer at the Iridium, and I do the show for Les and produce part of the show too. So I'm the announcer, I drive him in, we do all of that stuff, we talk about the show. And the main thing is about guitar and how guitar should sound, because Les was responsible for getting great sound on guitars being recorded, as well as making and helping design the Les Paul guitar with the Gibson Company. And so all of that is tied into me and my music and growing. Originally I started working with my family and my sister, who were all performers, and we would go out and play in every VFW you could think of, and every nightclub we could find. That's how it really grew. Well, perseverance. I think that's the most important thing. By persevering at something, you will get very good at it. If you stay at it, you'll get good. If you don't, how can you get good at it? You've got to work hard. So even if you have talent, the talent is only one ingredient and maybe 10%. The rest of it is inspiration and working hard. So that's what you have to think of.
So that's probably the most important lesson that you've learned, right?
I think so. I think because you see, in guitar building, there were no schools for it in my day. So today they do have schools. So if somebody wanted to learn to make a guitar, I do have a small school, by the way, also. And there are other schools available throughout the United States. But teaching guitar building, or the craft or the art of making guitars, is not that easy. It's a long process. Anybody that comes to me would have to study for at least a year just to get the basics down really well. They'll make a guitar or two with me, but they're going to be basically learning all that year on how to do that. So what we have here at my shop is really an apprenticeship. It would take, in the overall picture, if I was only working on that guitar, I could probably build it in 3 months, okay? That's from a piece of wood to the final guitar and putting a finish on it and completing it and assembling it and then giving it to the artist who bought it. But that means I can only work on that guitar. So when you're talking about I can only work on that guitar, I better be making about $50,000 for the guitar, you see what I'm saying? So you can't do that, so you have to amortize building guitars. So you make about 10 guitars a year if you're lucky, and you amortize the cost over a period of time in between doing repairs and also restorations and many other things that I do. Well, it varies. We have the situation which I created for the mini school that we have here is that we can hold about 10 students. We have about 5 to 7 students every 2 weeks, okay? Now, the key to this is that everybody is not on the same level, but what's interesting about the school is that when a person is a little more advanced, the new student can see what he can attain by looking at the other students. And the camaraderie of the students is fantastic because any new student that comes in, they take them right underneath their wing and show them how they progress to that point.
Right, a little bit
Oh, sure. Restoration is another part of the business. And I started actually my company as a restoring company. And I did a lot of restoration and repairs initially. I did build guitars, but not in the way I do now. And that restoration comes from the fact that we have instruments here that you can't get them anymore. The people that made them have passed away. So the only thing you can do, what happens with wood, it does rot, it does deteriorate. So if you don't do something to it, it's going to be just a bunch of splinters. So what I do in restoration is bring them back to the original state as much as I can, keeping all of the original materials and parts that I can. Where I can't, I manufacture a new part by hand and match it to make the same look as it once was. There's a couple of other builders, yes. They're not building any big way, let's put it that way. They're building small, just like me. I'm probably one of the bigger ones in the sense that I actually have a facility upstairs and downstairs with this much room. It's not often that you have that. But that's because I've been in the business for 40 years, you know. So I've accumulated that over a period of time. Lineage, if you know the word lineage, where you come from is very important, meaning the background that you have and how you carry forward with that. Now, if you don't use that lineage properly, then it means nothing. But that's what makes the value of the product that I build. So if I'm working with Les Paul, Jimmy Page, Steve Miller, you name them, if I'm working with those kind of people and I'm doing things for them, that means a lot to what I build. That must mean I make a good instrument, hopefully. Anyway, the point being is that that lineage comes along with me. And the association with Les Paul is a big help also, because he is the biggest name in the guitar world there is. All of the other names actually came after him. So he's the one who was the innovator, designer, and developer of sound and the kind of solid body guitar that Gibson makes called the Les Paul. Sound. There's just one word, sound. If there's a word that describes Les, it's sound. And always strive for that best sound you can get out of the instrument. Now, not everybody's ear is the same. Now, what I mean by that is you may not hear the sound that I can hear. So you have to develop that. So as the guitar player gets more mature in his playing, he begins to hear the deficiencies and keeps on looking for what they call the Holy Grail, which is the best sounding guitar they can find. That's not the only reason I married my wife, but her talent was extraordinary. Like I said, I worked originally with my sister and still do when she's down in Naples, Florida, actually. That's where she is. But my wife and I have the duo that we work throughout the Eastern Coast, and hopefully in Europe we want to work there too. But anyway, yes, that influence of Les Paul and Murray Ford has certainly influenced our duo that we have. And we try to be a little bit more modern today and develop our own sound and so on. But what we still have to attain is what Les Paul and Murray Ford did. If you listen to, and I know you haven't, but if you listen to any of Les Paul and Murray Ford records, they're even great today, considering they were made 50 years ago. So it's hard to believe that that's great today, but it is, because of the sound that he had. And he actually worked on that feverishly for days and hours. He prided himself in not going to sleep for 11 days at a time, you know, just trying to solve problems. So it gives you an idea of what it takes to perseverance. And his idol was another guitar player named Django Reinhardt, who was another famous guitar player who was unbelievable from France. But Thomas Edison was the other person that Les idolized tremendously. And so I idolize the same people he idolizes, because how are you going to learn if you don't do that? You have to learn from these people. And when you go to college, you're learning from people who were those people, really. They made curriculum out of it. That's what actually happens. So.